introduction. It's an introductionary theme. JTAKRAOSPE, Episode 2, The Legend of Curly's Gold. Welcome to Episode 2 of the podcast. I am, of course, Jollytheoldsaint. Today's first subject is video games. Then I'll move on to politics. Actually, to get that out the way, politics are dull, and I'm like never to bring it up. I will wrap things up with this week's episode of Kamen Rider 4s. And then a special secret message to everyone who doesn't give a crap about Kamen Rider or even my sumptuous tomes, but listens anyway because they care. And that's nice of them. Video games. Are they corrupting our youth? Of course not. I don't have kids, least of all with you. I do enjoy video games though, so I'll share some thoughts on them. Some other time I'll delve deeper into certain franchises or games, I'm sure, but there's a lot to catch up on, so I figure I'll start broad. Let's kick it off with rhythm games, the games that involve rhythm. The idea is to properly dance or mash buttons as a song plays. A fine type of game to bring all your funky self, although mine is a funk which cannot be contained by rules or scores. So, I've more or less forgotten the genre. Of course, the first example of this sort of game that anyone would think of is Os Tatakai Oendan, the DS beat game released only in Japan. It's a game which shows the struggles of men, women, and children in desperate need of male cheerleaders to give them fighting spirit. Of course, it's all in Japanese, and I don't speak a word, so that summation is just going from the pictures. For all I know, actually it probably is just Nazi propaganda. Sorry. Beat 'em ups. The game's about beating them up. You know, them. No, them. Lots of joy to be had in these ones. Them are smug bastards, and I love taking them down a peg. The best example I can think of for this genre is Fist of the North Star, Ken's Adamantium Rage. It's a game that properly demonstrates the horrors of a nigh-endless cycle of violence, like as anything to be a metaphor for the tribulations of man. Also, it looks pretty when the good guys make the bad guys' heads explode with a Big Dipper-y fighting style. Surprisingly, a style which doesn't involve any pots or pans. Hack and slash action. The game's about hacking and slashing them up. Sort of like a beat-em-up, you might think, but you can cheat in these by using sharp things. It's a fine sort of game, but I wish they'd just pick a side and hack or slash. Now, one game of this sort which I like is Blood Will Tell, a game which, I assure you, was released. It's about a man who's not so much a man as a freaky robot born of someone's satanic pact with a bunch of demons. You see, each of the demons took a part of his body as a baby, which still grew as the years went on, while his robot body, that of course replaced the baby, also grew. Wanting to see and hear and feel and stuff though, Freaky Robot Man goes off killing the demons with his body parts and gets them back one by one. It's a wonderful 40-ish hour experience about a man desperately trying to find his penis. First-person shooters. The games in which you shoot the first person you come across. A favorite amongst young people and cheating bastards, the first-person shooter has been a multiplayer staple since the staple gun-based pornographic film named Multiplayer Staple. Truth be told, I haven't played a first-person shooter through to the end in quite some time. This is because lately they all share the same flaw, that being that none of them are time splitters. Time Splitters, of course, is a series I'm not going to talk about because I'm still angry they haven't made the fourth goddamn game yet. Overhead shooters. Like a shooter, but seen from above. Okay, it's not a real genre, but screw it. I want to mention my favorite overhead shooter, Paki and Raki. It follows a young woman and a raccoon friend as they fight for survival against a horde of demonic hellspawn. It's a swell romp of a game. It would become the basis for the show Kate Plus 8. Strategy games. The games with the fancy schmancy thinking. Now, you might see this as me pigeonholing a wide range of games that require strategy, but they're all the same to me, and I'll tell you why. Just as soon as I find out the best way to tackle that subject. One strategy game worth mentioning is Civilization. Pick a number. This is a game in which the player builds a nation, which shall ideally develop into the best nation in the world. I've always enjoyed the way this series compresses the evolution of man and even the history of the world into one gigantic sausage fest. Yes, that's Civ Pick a Number. 2 women in the game. One of them's Cleopatra. Platformers. The game's about platforms and how they are despicable, godforsaken things out to kill you. One platformer that came out quite recently is Rayman Origins. Now I picked this up because I thought it would be about Ray Fillet, the Man Ray from Archie's TMNT comics, but unfortunately it is not. It's a fun game though. You punch, you kick, you fly around. They tease you by making you think there's a bunch of secret characters, but they're all fucking palette swaps. Though I'll be honest, that's not as disappointing as in Blood Will Tell, where you find the demon with the hero's third nipple. Japanese RPGs. The game's about teenage boys out to save the universe. Well, it's swell if you're into that kind of thing. For an example of this, instead of my favorite, I'll pick out one I picked up just recently. Artanelico Koga. That's Koga with a Q. I looked at this game and thought, well, they did spell Koga with a Q. That's worth a shot in my book. And it turns out it's a game where you strip your female partners naked by shaking a controller so as they can use their nakedness to kill your enemies. I'm gonna move on. Oh fuck, the next one's hentai games. Okay, hentai games. The game's about that thing I just described, more or less. Now, on the record, I do play the hell out of these games, but off the record, I'm actually starting to panic now as I realize I have to think of an example to use for this. 'Cause I'd honestly like to keep you guessing as to whether I was telling the truth or not about playing these. Maybe I'll just use that Koga game again. Yeah, why not? It's a decent game. Screw it, I played worse. Better than Rayplay. Adventure games. The games where something exciting happens, which inspires someone to take on stuff and such. Actually, that could go for hentai games too. Well, adventure games tend to have dialogue options to provide the illusion of depth. Actually, that's almost every hentai game. But I'm talking about games like Baldur's Gate, which I know it sounds like a hentai game. It's not. Although there is a blue lady in the game you can fuck if you play your cards right. It's not a hentai game. It's adventurous, and there's a bald guy with a hamster. Let's just get to 4s.